How do you keep a blonde busy?
How?
Right flip on both sides of a piece of paper. If you're here today, we thank you for that. And that means that our dad touched your life in some way or another. That means you miss him in some way or another, and he probably told you at least one joke. My name is Vanessa, his oldest daughter. My name is Michelle, his second oldest daughter. We'll especially miss his humor and corny jokes. He loved to tell jokes, and we're not sure how he could remember them all. He seemed to have a never-ending supply, and he was particularly fond of telling us blonde jokes. We racked our brains to try to remember some that he told. It pains me that we cannot remember any specific jokes, blonde jokes, or jokes. And we actually had to Google search blonde jokes. But, that's the trouble with life. You take moments for granted, and you think that there's always going to be another opportunity to talk. The last time that I spoke with my dad, I remember he called me while I was at work, and he sounded so good. And it had been a while since we had talked on the phone, and he had sounded that good and so spontaneous. And so I remember thinking, crap, I'm running late for this meeting with my boss, but my dad's on the phone, he sounds good. And so I stayed on the phone with him because I really wanted to cherish that conversation with him. I eventually let him go to my meeting, and told him I'd call him back later that night. Later in the afternoon, I picked up my phone and looked and saw that he had naturally texted me a blonde joke, but he didn't finish it. It just said, how many blondes, and then it stopped. As we stand here, we see friends and relatives that have come great distances to be here for our dad. We're humbled and impressed at how he must have touched your lives. We can only speak for ourselves, but when we think of how he touched our lives, the first word that comes to mind is admiration. We admire his commitment and dedication to his profession. Growing up, he would come home after a long day of making rounds at the hospital and then working at the office all day. He'd usually be so exhausted that he would crash in the chair, like you saw in some of the pictures, sometimes while reading the newspaper or journal or something. But working so many hours made him pretty hungry. And so he'd often come home to our mom cooking dinner. And so when she would ask him if he was hungry, he would answer, yes, of course. But then she'd ask him why he had cheese stuck to his beard or mustache. He'd always manage to get busted by stopping by Del Taco on his way home. So this was back before there was Taco Bell. There was a Del Taco by the office, and I think he went there every day after work, but never admitted to it. His humor, kindness, and gentle spirit are what we remember most, and how much he loved being a doctor and helping people. When we were growing up, he was always working, and so when we had opportunities to hang out with our dad, it was pretty awesome. He was goofy, sweet, and a little eccentric at times. A lot of the times, as he got older. My memories of our family vacations always remind me fondly of Clark Griswold and National Lampoon's Vacation. That's how, if I ever had to describe him, that's what I normally say. Our dad would always say, wake me up when we get there, on road trips, which would simultaneously always scare the crap out of us and make us laugh.
He was driving.
Yes, and his sleeping issues, yes, well known. Speaking of road trips, we looked forward to every summer when he would take us to New Braunfels, and we would float the Guadalupe River and spend a day at Schlitterbahn Water Park. But when we were in junior high, we'd be really embarrassed because he would somehow manage to wear a safari hat while eating blue cheese and bagel crisps and floating down the river at the same time. I remember being allowed to work in his office in the summer between 4th grade and 5th grade, and looking back, it gave me a special glimpse of who our dad was at work, which up to that point we'd only heard about from classmates or their parents. We've always been really proud of the contributions Dad made to the community as a doctor, as well as for instilling the values of service, family, and community onto us. And this probably sounds strange, but there are certain smells that will always remind us of our dad. Juicy fruit gum, which is why there's so much out front because he loved juicy fruit. Gaviscon, which is like a heartburn
He popped
stuff.
it like candy.
Yes, he ate Gaviscon like candy. Old Spice cologne, Speed Stick deodorant, burning leaves, and pipe tobacco. And I'll explain why. When we were little, he spent a lot of time driving us to school and to other places in his van. This was before he had the Suburban, but the van also looked like he lived in it. We were always embarrassed when he would drop us off for school because papers would fall out as we got out of the cups, or cups, just random objects. So we would beg for him to drop us off like way back down the street so our friends wouldn't see us get out of his van. But he always had juicy fruit gum and a bottle of Gaviscon for his heartburn in the van with him. And he chewed both religiously, and those smells permeated his van. He enjoyed wearing Old Spice cologne and Speed Stick deodorant. In the fall, we'd often have lots of leaves in our yard that we would, I say enjoyed raking, but I think there are times if we said we were bored, he'd tell us to go rake the leaves. And so, but we liked doing that because he would make a big bonfire out of the leaves, and so we thought that was really cool. And so you could smell, I don't know, burning leaves remind me of my dad because of that. And also when we were much younger, he enjoyed smoking pipes for a little bit of time, and so the scent of pipe tobacco has always been comforting.
I don't recall our dad ever saying a disparaging word about anyone. He was always validating, empathetic, but diplomatic in his words, and for this, I've always admired that level of integrity.
He also never seemed to complain, at least not to us, if he felt bad, and because of this, many of you might not be aware that he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in his late 40s. The MS caused lesions in his brain, which affected his behavior at times, which is probably why he got more and more eccentric as he got older. But because of this, we all saw different sides of him. We saw the dad that we remember growing up with, but for his kids later, they saw a different dad, one who was more symptomatic. Friends, colleagues, and patients probably saw a mixture of these sides.
While we did not really know him well growing up because his professional commitments kept him busy, we're grateful for the opportunities that we had to get to know him as we became older. It saddens us that his younger children may not have had those same opportunities to get to know him due to his illness. Nevertheless, he loved his family immensely. His family and having connections with all of us in different ways was very important to him. After his own father passed away, I think these connections shifted for him in a profound way. He loved all of his kids and grandkids and took so much pride in sharing updates, especially in regards to his younger children, Cammie, Brendan, and Hope. He always made a point to share what they were up to or how well they were doing in academics, tennis, theater, or piano. He was extremely proud of his children and his grandchildren.
And to give our dad closure with his last blonde joke he texted that he didn't finish, we found some possible endings. So here goes. How many blondes does it take to change a light bulb? 3. 1 to hold the light bulb, 2 to spin the ladder. Dad, we're going to remember you for all these things and so much more. We're all going to miss you. Your intelligence, humor, dedication, kind soul, patience, gentleness, compassion, and generosity will stay with us forever. So through our tears, let us see the blessings of knowing and loving you. We love you, Dad. Thank you.
Thank you.